If you're looking for the ultimate gift for yourself or the shooter or competitor in your life, then this should be an item consideration. The brand new LabRadar LX Doppler radar. Is it what the original LabRadar was supposed to be, or is it still held back by issues? Let's find out. Knowing the velocity at which your ammunition is coming out of your gun is something that is nice to know for hunters and essential to know for competitors, and that is why many of us have devices such as this, or what we call a chronograph. A chronograph is a device that measures time and something you would be familiar with if you are a watch person. The way it translates into the gun world is that we measure time over a specific distance, which we use to calculate velocity. Traditionally, gun owners used optical chronographs such as these, and today we have what I believe is the pinnacle solution, the LabRadar LX. As many people are already familiar with these devices, you can go ahead and skip to the deep dive where we discuss the new LX and how it differs from the rest. However, if you're like the majority of gun owners and either do not have a chronograph or want to learn why you should have one, let's discuss. Let's get the obvious thing out of the way. This device gives you the velocity of the ammunition as it's coming out of the gun. So why is that important? If you're like one of the millions of gun owners who goes out to the indoor range to shoot handguns at 15 yards or even an outdoor range and shoot steel plates at 100 yards, then no, you likely do not need a chronograph. If you do anything beyond that, you likely do, even if you're not a hand loader. I view a chronograph in a number of ways. First, it's a needed piece of equipment if you load your own ammunition. Sometimes the velocity of the ammunition is the reason you hand load. Other times the velocity is just a factor, such as when you're targeting ultimate precision. Using a chronograph as part of the ammo loading process is a deep rabbit hole, so we can leave that for a separate video, and there's lots of other content creators out there who are far more qualified as it relates to that topic. Surprisingly, a chronograph is a needed piece of equipment, even if you're not loading your own ammunition. The first time I purchased a chronograph, this guy, was when I started shooting USPSA and other handgun matches. In those competitions, one of the requirements which you need to meet is power factor, which is a combination of the bullet velocity and the bullet weight. Failing to meet power factor may mean you just wasted hundreds of dollars on the match fees and travel expenses. The other competitions where a chronograph is going to be an essential tool is precision rifle and long range matches. As soon as you start shooting past your dialed in zero, you absolutely need to know the holdovers, and the biggest variable and input in that equation is the velocity of the ammunition that you're shooting. Now, someone will point out and say, why do I need a chronograph? Companies such as Hornady, La Pua, LA, Igila, and Federal put it on the box. Okay, I couldn't butcher the name Federal. The truth is, the numbers that Hornady, Lapua, Ely, Aguila, and Federal put on the box is about as useful as Ford telling me that my electric pickup gets 240 miles of range. In reality, I get anywhere between 200 and 300 depending on the weather, the elevation, and how I'm driving. The velocity quoted on the box is simply a target and one snapshot in time in a particular test barrel at a certain point. The velocity that you get out of your gun is going to be different and impacted every time based on the outside environmentals, such as the temperature, the elevation, the humidity, and your gun's variables, such as the length of the barrel and the barrel life. Throwing on a different muzzle device or a suppressor will also have an impact on the velocity numbers. For instance, this ammo, which I just shot, the Norma Match 22, is quoted at 1083. I just shot it out of one of my guns, and we were testing the LabRadar LX, and the numbers we got were right around 1020. A different day, we were actually in the 1040s, 1050s. Out of a different gun, I get close to 1100 feet per second with this box. Rimfire ammunition in particular is also susceptible to the cold bore phenomenon. Not only will the point of impact shift, but your velocity will also differ by as much as 50 feet per second. As if those factors weren't enough to make a difference and an impact on the impact, it's on the box, often what's on the box doesn't even match what's in the box. I purchased a case of this Norma Match rimfire ammunition, which came from two different lots, and the second purchased averaged 40 feet per second faster than the original lot from the first purchase. This is why at every rifle match, you'll see competitors pull out for chronographs to get the baseline velocity data for that day, and some even go as far as chronoing throughout the day. Being off 30 or 40 feet from the baseline may mean that you're missing the target altogether inside 100 yards with a rimfire firearm or a center fire firearm once you head out past 300 yards. Okay, so what if you don't plan on loading your own ammunition or shooting a match? Perhaps the best yet most overlooked way of using a chronograph is as a diagnostic tool, especially if you're buying factory ammo. The cold hard truth is that the vast majority of factory loaded ammo is garbage if you're focused on precision, especially when it comes to bulk style ammo that you would feed your ARs and AKs, and the bulk box rimfire ammunition is even worse. The ammunition is loaded for reliability and not precision. Yet, millions of gun owners unnecessarily waste their money by blaming their guns for accuracy issues rather than themselves or the ammo. Picture the scenario. It's happened to everyone. You purchased your firearm and you're at the range trying to sight it in. In fact, probably one of the people that you're hearing shooting in the background is going through this issue right now. Everything is mounted properly, you shoot one shot, you're on paper. So you adjust your scope for the point of impact. You shoot your second shot, and now you see the impact is off to the other direction. You make the adjustment once again, and you fire another round. And once again, you're not in the ballpark. You make the adjustment and you shoot again, and once again, your impact is off. Repeat this 5 or 6 more times before you start blaming your scope, your mount, or simply, this gun just doesn't shoot. The most helpful tool in diagnosing accuracy issues is going to be a chronograph. A chronograph will rule out accuracy issues caused by simply shooting mediocre ammo through factory firearms. And someone will certainly say, well, why don't you just use good quality ammo? To which my reply would be, I have tested plenty of the most popular match grade boxes of ammo where the extreme spreads of as little as 5 to 10 rounds was as much as 100 feet per second, and the standard deviations were as high as 30 or 40 feet per second. And those variations will certainly have an impact on the point of impact. So, if you suck, it really might not be you, it might be your ammo. The key is you need a chronograph to rule that out. This is why in my videos when we're testing accuracy, I almost always have a chronograph working to help identify whether it was me, the gun, or ammunition. You cannot make a good proper judgment call without ruling the various factors out without the facts. So that is why I feel you may need a chronograph. Let's discuss what's available and how we got here to the LabRadar LX. So the most commonly available chronographs, and perhaps the chronograph most common with anyone who shot for more than 15 years, is something like this. A shoot-through chronograph by companies such as Competition Electronics and Shooting Chrono. Within the precision circles, the most common was the older brand, which even came with a separate printer, which was super cool. These work on a simple principle. You have two sensors, here and here. They shine a light, and what happens is it triggers a stopwatch when the bullet passes the first sensor and stops the count when the bullet passes the second sensor. You now have the time it took to pass between the two sensors. You have the known distance between the two sensors. Thus, you can calculate velocity. These are fairly simple and most affordable options today. There are, however, a number of drawbacks with these, namely one, you gotta shoot through this thing. Generally, you're going to set these at least 10 feet away from you so the chrono does not flip out from the muzzle flash and muzzle blast. And because it's not right there, you have a fairly limited zone to shoot through, which you have to shoot through. You're very likely to shoot the chronograph at some point. I've shot mine at least a few times, and most of the time it is these supports. You can see that I replaced it with this dowel, and also I did give it a nice little graze right here with a 9mm. And this is where you have the whole you shoot it, you bought it saying in the gun world. We're happy to lend you our chronograph, but if you shoot it, you bought it. Unfortunately, these are simply not rugged or tough. You know what is rugged and tough, however? This, the brand new Ridge wallet. Now, I've been a fan of minimalist wallets for a while now, and definitely like this one. As gun owners, we know the more space you got, the more stuff you're going to bring with you. Whereas all we really need is space for a few credit cards, our driver's license, our carry permit, and some cash. This definitely solves that issue, and as a fan of not flaunting it, I love that it does not leave a big bulge in your pocket that attracts attention. What's cool is that these are also modular, so if you prefer a money clip, you can add it. Or in my case, I will be adding on this, which is an Apple AirTag clip, which will let you use your iOS device to locate your wallet. If you're looking for a gift for yourself or a loved one, definitely check these out. A good gift is something that you would want, and a great gift is something someone would want and ordinarily would not get for themselves. These are a great gift, and you can even personalize it for them. You can also use the promo code YouTube10 for an additional 10% off at checkout. Thank you, and thank you Ridge Wallet for the wallet. Fortunately, the Ridge wallets do not have the next drawback. So because these are optical sensors, you must have good lighting. As such, these are made to be used outdoors and pretty much are useless indoors or when the sun starts going down, unless you add external lights. And just the whole combination of these things makes it bulky and cumbersome to deal with. And we dealt with it until this came out, the evolutionary MagnetoSpeed. The MagnetoSpeed works on the same chronograph principle, measuring the time between two sensors. However, it dumps the problematic optical sensors and replaces it with two electromagnetic sensors. The MagnetoSpeed solved a number of big issues, the first of which was having to shoot for a small window and having to set this up 10 yards down range, and having to make the range cold to make simple changes or to even read the data. It also solved the problem with reliability, as these were far more likely to pick up the shots, no matter the lighting conditions. Perhaps the biggest problem the MagnetoSpeed solved was getting the true velocity that you need at the muzzle rather than 10 or 15 yards down range that you got with an optical chronograph. The MagnetoSpeed did come with a few drawbacks, however. First is the price. The MagnetoSpeed was multiples more expensive than traditional optical chronographs. The MagnetoSpeed sold between $250 and $450 depending on the models, while you can pick up an optical chronograph on sale for $100 or less. The other limitation with the MagnetoSpeed is because it used electromagnetic sensors rather than optical sensors, and because it has to be mounted to the barrel, so your barrel would be here, and your barrel will go right about here, and it would capture sensor 1, sensor 2. And because it has to be mounted so close to the barrel, It's primarily meant to be used with centerfire rifles. The more expensive unit can be mounted to a Picatinny rail at the bottom of the handgun. However, you'd not be able to use it with revolvers or handguns with no rails. Furthermore, you cannot use these with archery or paintball and most likely air guns. The other issues, however, were more related to precision. While you could have shot for groups while shooting through a chronograph, for most guns, your point of impact would shift while using a magnetospeed as it's attached to the barrel, thus changing the barrel harmonics. So while yes, you could have certainly get truer velocity numbers at the muzzle, unless you plan on shooting with the magnetospeed, you still have to re-zero unless you plan on shooting the rifle match or whatever with the magnetospeed attached, in which case I would argue that it's not repeatable anyway. Now, the question you might have is, does adding weight to the barrel change the point of impact? Of course it does. And it does not even need to be added to the barrel. We recently added 2 pounds of weight to the forend of my friend's Ruger Precision rimfire, and he changed the point of impact by 2 mils or about 6 inches at 50 yards. This is why companies such as Wiser Precision came up with this, an accessory which moves the magnetospeed from being mounted directly to the barrel to being mounted along the clamp. So the magnetospeed would get attached to here, then this gets mounted to the Picatinny or the arc rail and it gets attached to the gun. Then this, when it's going to be attached into this is going to be parallel to the barrel. If you're shooting from a stationary position, this is not bad at all, and I've seen these solutions used in matches such as King of 1 and King of 2 miles throughout the world. This accessory also solves the issue of many shooters shooting their magnetospeeds when the chronograph would shift or tilt and the bullet would end up impacting the magnetospeed itself. So one of the issues that you have, especially with the ones that go around the barrel, is that it's going to shift, and over time, let's say for example it gets tilted while it would still clear here, your bullet would impact right around here, and thus you'd be shooting part of the bayonet off. So if the magnetospeed was evolutionary, then this was revolutionary. The original LabRadar by Infinition and my LabRadar. And while oh so many of you are going to agree with me that this is the most pain in the butt tool with so many issues and horrendous support, this is also the most powerful tool we have and many of us depended on. The LabRadar made its debut a bit over 10 years ago and not only solved all of the issues with traditional chronographs and the magnetospeed, but it also gave us significantly more data. And even today is still the most powerful and useful chronograph in the shooting sports market. So let's get it out of the way. The original LabRadar and even the newer LabRadar LX and Garmin units are not traditional chronographs. They're not chronographs in the sense of using 2 optical or 2 electromagnetic sensors. They are chronographs, however, in the time measuring sense that they do measure the time. However, instead of using sensors, this uses a Doppler radar. These units were the first commercially available Doppler radars adapted for our markets. The LabRadar sends out a wave and counts the time until it gets back the reflection. As such, while it's not a traditional shooting chronograph, it is a chronograph as it's a device used to measure time. The 2 biggest issues that the LabRadar solved is that you can put it right there next to your firearm and you do not need to shoot through anything. More specifically, you're not having to go set up a device downrange while the range is cold, nor are you going to go shoot the thing by accident. At least I hope you don't. Furthermore, you can use the LabRadar during matches and still make the ammo count, as it's not at all impacting your point of impact, whereas the magnetospeed would. Beyond solving those issues, the most revolutionary benefit is that not only can you get the velocity at the muzzle, but you can get the velocities of the bullets out to 100 yards. The Doppler radar follows the bullet, and in the reports, you can get the velocity at various points of flight, something completely not possible with the MagnetoSpeed and certainly impractical to do, even if you shoot through numerous optical chronographs. It was because of the LabRadar that numerous bullet manufacturers were called out for their lies of the overly optimistic ballistic coefficients of the projectiles, as gun owners were able to track the velocities at multiple distances and thus calculate the true BC of a bullet. But OMFG, the OG LabRadar caused more gray hairs and people screaming than almost any other shooting accessory. While the LabRadar is extremely powerful, it had a lot of issues. First, it was very intricate in terms of where it had to be positioned near a firearm in order to get triggered. Second, it takes a little bit to get it set up properly to trigger, and if you shot with a suppressor, especially a suppressed 22 or air guns, you would have to get a microphone accessory or a community modification which used a pressure switch to activate the LabRadar. One of the things that you find with the LabRadar in particular is that there were a lot of community modifications in order to overcome the issues because oftentimes the company was unresponsive. One of the other community hacks was something like this, which is a 3D printed sight. These were very peculiar as to it had to be positioned in the right way. And the only thing you had was kind of like a line here. So some people, what they did was they came out with the STL files and you can 3D print this accessory, and I had it printed in orange, which has a peep sight through it. And if you want, you can have a pick rail on top and mount a red dot so it'd be easier to aim. It was that specific that it had to be pointed at the target. Beyond that, the most common hardware issue was broken micro USB ports, and mine is not any different. The LabRadar does not have an internal battery and would use a metric ton of AA batteries. So, unless you were hoarding batteries or you're invested in Duracell, you likely used an external USB power bank, which would use a micro USB cable to plug in right here. The issue is the LabRadar uses a micro USB port, which was fragile at best as it was, but because it was also perpendicular to the unit and the cable stuck out, at any time you tugged on the cable, you would end up with bent cables and broken ports. The LabRadar is extremely powerful and would store all of the data on the SD card, and you'd be able to access the SD cards from a computer to get the full shot data. The LabRadar also comes with a Bluetooth module, and you could access the live data through an app, unless you couldn't, because my 3 young children were far more likely to listen to me than I was able to get a connection to the LabRadar. After a while as a LabRadar owner, you learn you show all your friends how cool it is because you can connect your phone. However, you don't actually use that feature yourself because you only end up screaming at the LabRadar when you have to reconnect to the unit every 3 shots anyway. Perhaps the biggest issue with owning a LabRadar was not actually the LabRadar itself, but the US distributor, My LabRadar. The LabRadar device was created and developed by Infinition, a Canadian defense company involved with radars since the 90s. The LabRadar device was marketed and distributed by the exclusive distributor in the United States, My LabRadar, and in my opinion, the biggest reason for people's issues with the product. This is why a bit over a year ago, when the Garmin launched the Xero Doppler radar, countless competitors and shooters dumped their LabRadars, causing the resale values to crash and distributors to panic. Is Garmin as powerful a tool as the original LabRadar? No. But why deal with a company who does not support the product nor values you as a customer when you can deal with a multi-billion-dollar company who can at least develop an app that actually works. This year alone, 4 of my immediate shooting buddies purchased a Garmin Xero, and they're not my YouTuber friends who essentially need a chrono. And since Garmin came out, I have not used my LabRadar as I would have used their Garmin's instead. The Garmin is smaller, cheaper, and more importantly, more reliable than the original LabRadar. Almost overnight, the LabRadars were replaced at matches with numerous Garmin units. I will include videos here of the Garmin Xero. Unfortunately, none of my friends came out with me to the range today, so I cannot show you the side-by-side, but I do have videos of them used side-by-side. A few months later, this came out, the LabRadar LX, and based on the timing, it surely seemed like a quick response to the Garmin. The problem is, even if the new LX was better, why bother dealing with my LabRadar when you can deal with a company that did not mistreat you? So, when I saw an Instagram post for the LabRadar LX, I had to put in my 2 cents. And it was not even about the LX, but rather defending the Garmin Xero. What I did not expect was for the decision makers to listen and reach out. Shortly after my comment on Instagram, I received a DM from the president of Infinition, the parent company, asking me to share my opinion. While I initially thought that this was simply a little too late and a symbolic gesture, I shared my detailed feedback anyway, simply because I do want to help out smaller companies, and I do believe that everyone in the shooting sports industry, because it's still a relatively small industry, we need to stick together. What I did not truly expect was for him to really care. While I'm not going to share my private communications, I will say their detailed explanations of responsibilities, and most of all, taking responsibility for the issues that they were in control of. As expected, the vast majority of the issues I personally faced were within the controls of the US distributor. The great news is the parent company is no longer stuck in their exclusive distributor agreement and are now taking the responsibilities onto themselves. I was also offered my own LabRadar LX to take a look at, and I accepted, and here it is. In full disclosure, this unit was sent to me. I did not pay for it. I'm not under any obligations to the company. I did not promise any videos. I did not accept any money. I merely said that I would take an open look at the device and provide feedback if warranted, and I am oh so glad I did. This is my LabRadar LX, and I think this is the ideal shooting chronograph today. This is in essence what the OG LabRadar should have been. So let's dive in. The LX is a more streamlined, updated OG LabRadar. First and foremost is the size. The LX is compact at just 2.5 by 2.75 by 2.75 inches. It is also much tougher and is made out of aluminum rather than plastic. The LX now has an internal battery, so you do not need to carry a small stockpile of AA batteries or an external power bank. The LX also has replaced the micro USB power connector with a more durable standard USB-C connector. The internal battery should last all day. However, if you need to recharge it, the good news is you can keep using the unit while you're recharging it, something that's not possible with the Garmin. What you can certainly appreciate is that the USB-C connector has been relocated to the bottom, which will further help if you're using this in the rain. The cable is perpendicular to the ground, so if it gets yanked, it's going to get yanked down and it is not going to damage the port. The biggest change, however, are inside. The LX uses a completely different sensor and is operationally built different. The way that was explained to me is that everything was built on top of an operating system. As such, they went the Tesla route. You have the hardware built in and you can continually add updates to the unit. The LX is far more reliable and does not require precise alignment to trigger. The unit will trigger and reject shots within 50 milliseconds. Most impressive, the LX has no issues picking up my suppressed rimfire guns shooting subsonic ammo as long as the unit is relatively close to the muzzle, even on the standard trigger level. You can further tune that down and it looks like you still have a microphone jack on the bottom if you want to keep using the unit with external triggers or pressure switches. As you can see, we tested the LX on the same gun at the same time with the Garmin, and the LX either kept up or in many cases processed the shots faster than the Garmin. So why would someone pick up the LX versus the Garmin? The LX is certainly a more capable unit and is, in my opinion, a more refined product. Yes, both the Garmin and the LX spit out the velocity data as you clearly saw in the video. But what if you want to get downrange velocity as well as at the muzzle or 5 yards downrange? You can certainly do that with the LabRadar LX, and you cannot do that with the Garmin. While the LX will not give you continuous data points as the big OG LabRadar can, it can give you the velocity at both at the muzzle and at a certain distance that you set further downrange. This begs the question, what can you do with this additional functionality on the LX? Since its release, Infinition, the parent company, has released 5 major updates earlier this year since its launch, all of which initially improved reliability and small upgraded features. The most current update, which was just released as of a couple of days ago, as I was planning out this video, added a major feature, the ability to calculate the true ballistic coefficient, something that is not possible by any other unit today, including the OG. This was something that was promised to me when we were discussing this earlier, and just as I was preparing this video, I saw that the firmware update was released on November 1st. Beyond that, the LX versus the Garmin, the LX has a different screen. It's 1000 nits and is much brighter than the screen type used on the Garmin. One issue we'll have with the screen used on the Garmin, and to a lesser extent on the LX, is if you wear polarized sunglasses. On the Garmin, you have to look straight on. I had issues seeing anything with at any angle to the Garmin. With the LX, it's certainly darker, however, you can still make out the screen. The biggest thing that I noticed, however, is that the LX is easier and faster to use due to more external buttons. One common thing you will do with these units is to test different ammo. Both of the units will let you create series of shots. You can create a new series on the app or on the unit. On the Garmin, it takes 8 button presses to create a new series if you're done shooting your current one. On the LX, it takes 2. Another difference is what these units are rated to do and how they're meant to be used. When Garmin came out, gun owners immediately started mounting their Garmin units to their firearms. This was something that seemed smart to do as it eliminated the need to have the unit aligned to the gun as both are on the same plane. Unfortunately, Garmin came out and said that the units are not recoil rated and you should not do that. Would they be able to prove it? Probably not. However, the LX is rated for recoil and is even advertised mounted to a firearm. As per the president of the company, the LX units are rated for 7.62 or 308 recoil. I am not a Garmin hater, and I absolutely love the Garmins when I used with my friends over the past year. But the LX is certainly more capable, and now we have a major feature difference, the ability to calculate BC, and that's something that's just simply not possible on the Garmins and other units. I will do a separate video once I have more time with the new firmware update, and we'll do a separate video on how to update the firmware on the device. So who is the device for? Functionally, the LabRadar LX is for the 99% of gun owners who may want a chronograph. This tool will give you the velocity that you need in order to calculate the ballistics for your rifle, and now will also be a tool that you can get the true ballistic coefficient of the bullet, and that's certainly not possible outside of LabRadar. You can also use it with your handguns, air rifles, paintball guns, even bows and crossbows, something you cannot do with the MagnetoSpeed. If you need a chronograph and you have the budget, this is certainly a great purchase and a worthwhile investment in addition to your tool chest. If you currently have a Garmin, most likely just keep it unless you really need the ability to calculate the true ballistic coefficient. If you're a current LabRadar owner, then it's definitely a bit tougher of a pill to swallow. We've certainly supported the company in the past and have dealt with horrible support. Functionally, the original LabRadars are actually more capable units, and the company has gone a long way towards updating the firmware as much as they can, and I hope they continue to make it more reliable. There is no denying, however, the new LX is functionally an easier unit to live with and what the original LabRadar should have been. I know the company is watching, and what I would suggest is to see if there's a way that existing LabRadar owners can get some sort of a loyalty credit towards the purchase of a new LX, or better yet, offer a trade-in program where the owners can trade in the original units towards the new LX. I'm sure some of the components can be reused, and there's probably a market for refurbished or recertified LabRadar units, and this would certainly reduce electronic waste. Most of all, it would show the community that Infinition cares about their customers. Overall, I want to thank Guy for reaching out and listening. The new LX is a fantastic product, and recent interactions are an amazing first step towards regaining trust with the shooting community. If you want to pick up your own LabRadar LX and help support the channel, shop through the links below. And you can learn more on LabRadar's website. More videos on the new BC functionality and how to update the firmware are going to come very, very soon. What do you think? Is the new LabRadar LX everything you hoped for, and is it worth the price tag? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching. Keep on squatting, and I'll see you in the next video linked up here.